introduction to you was an article I read way back when about this house in Vegas, this training facility, and I thought to myself, man, what a great idea. Tell us about the Maven VT.
Well, these days I'm running everything through the maventraining.com. I do primarily Skype training, worldwide audience, customers from Denmark to Singapore to Australia. Obviously, I do a lot of training here in Vegas as well. These days, I'm doing my boot camps out of different casinos. Though it looks fancy and it looks cool, it's actually more effective just to go to the casinos and ask them for a room and a projector. So these days, I do my boot camps out of the casinos, but still do a ton of training. I mean, I train students 7 days a week, every day of the week. A lot of it's just mentoring. They're going to send me hand histories. I'm going to answer those, or emails, questions. I've got a lot of students that call me during the break of live tournaments, and we talk chip stacks. Same thing with dinner breaks. They'll write down the different chip stacks, and we'll talk strategies relative to the opponents, how they play and what their chip stacks are.
Well, I want to make one mention about your website. I think it's great because it's got the perfect opening. I mean, a giant picture of you pops up, and you're right into it, right into the pitch. And I think it works because, let's face it, you're the ultimate pitch man. Your communication skills are excellent. Is that a natural thing, David? Did you always have that?
Well, I mean, I appreciate the compliment. I was in sales before I got into poker, and I like to think that I'm kind of dual brain. I can use the right side of my brain and the left side of my brain. So I've always been really good at math, and my dad was a math major. But at the same time, I'm also very creative. I play musical instruments. I write poetry. I like to think that I do both very well. I'm good at hard skills and soft skills. In a lot of ways, that translates well over to poker, not just playing it, but also, like, as you mentioned, teaching it. There's a lot of poker players that are way better than me, but there just aren't a lot of poker coaches that are better than me, and that's the way I look at it.
Yeah, it's one of those things that you must enjoy it, too. I mean, to be good at it, you have to enjoy it, and it must give you a great pleasure to take a student from, let's say, C-, and all of a sudden he tweets you or Facebooks you and says, listen, David, I'm winning, and you put him on an A+ all of a sudden. That must be a real, what do they call it, job enrichment, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, to me, there's no real difference. If someone goes from a D to a C or a B to an A, it's all progress. That's what it's all about. And, it's fun. It really is. Also, it's kind of cool for me that I develop relationships with people that I've never met. People come to me for training, and, I become their poker mentor when they do well. Obviously, I'm happy and they're happy, but I would say that easily half or two-thirds of all my friends, especially here in Vegas, are, former students or colleagues or other professional poker players, other poker coaches, other writers. So yeah, I mean, it almost becomes a big family at some point to where, it's, as the relationship builds, not only do we develop a poker relationship, but, most of the time we end up going out to dinner and becoming friends as well.
Tell me how a typical session, you talk about Skype and you talk about players, novices all over the world. How would a typical training session go down? Can I ask how much it costs? What do you do with them besides the hand histories?
Yeah, normally someone will contact me at themaventraining.com. I ask them to send me a preliminary email just giving me brief synopsis of what's going through their head, what their strengths are, what their perceived weaknesses are, what they want to work on, and just try to get a gauge of their experience level. I charge $100 an hour. Obviously, if someone's going to buy a big block, I normally do a better deal for returning students.
That might sound like a lot of money to a lot of people, but if you can improve their game to the point where in one hand they make the right move and win a $400 pot, it's already paid for itself.
Well, yeah, and I used to charge $400 an hour, a couple $1,000 a day, but, the economy stinks right now, and it's still great money for me, $100 an hour guaranteed. I'm more than motivated to help students. And you're right. I mean, in the real world, $100 is a lot of money. The thing is, in the poker world, it's nothing. It's absolutely nothing. And on top of that, if you look at it like some of these strategies will help you build bigger chip stacks and preserve the stacks that you get, in-game strategies. Bottom line is if you can just increase, your spot in the tournament from 5th place to 4th place or 3rd place to 2nd place, obviously there's a huge difference a lot of times because of progressive payout. So yeah, I mean, quite frankly, I've had a lot of people say, hey, why are you charging so little? And they're like, look at me all cross-eyed. But the students that have hired me, whether it's, you know, a 1 or 2 time lesson deal or it's, you know, ongoing mentorship, I've gotten great results. Everyone seems to be happy. I mean, worth noting is when I do mentorship, I'm pretty much on call. Whenever they need me, as long as I'm awake, I'm at my desk, I've got Skype open, I'm happy to answer their question, I'm happy to help them. And yeah, it really is a great value exchange where I'm able to impart my knowledge and expertise and help players come up. And quite frankly, I look at it like I'm able to shave months or years off of the learning curve. When you start poker, it's not just a learning curve. You got a learning curve, you got a profits curve, you got a pain curve. There's a lot of things that we're fighting against, whether it's our survival instincts when we get deep in a tournament and we naturally want to tighten up, or a lot of just knee-jerk reactions that we got to get out of the habit of, like re-raising too big when we have it, or you know, pushing people off the flop when we have it. A lot of little nuances to the game where if you're making the same mistakes over and over, you might not think it's a mistake. Also, if you read all the poker literature out there, there's a lot of common themes, like I alluded to, maybe thinning the field a little bit too much, too fast. And, you know, just the typical making it 3x where the pros are making it 2x or 2 1/4. Same thing with re-raising. You know, almost everyone triples a re-raise. So at 50, 100, if someone makes it 300, the average person will re-raise to 900. I like to teach that you can re-raise the minimum to 500. The maximum, let's say, is 900. But I give strategies of why you would make small, medium, and large re-raises in and out of positions against different types of opponents. And, you know, I like to think also that I've simplified the math dramatically. So everyone's so worried about all the math involved with poker, especially beginner to intermediate players, where I've really got it down very, very, very simplified. And as we both know, I mean, you've taken, you know, even middle school or high school algebra. If you can make an equation simplified, all of a sudden it's easy to solve. Where if you take, you know, one that's not simplified, even though it's the same exact equation in different terms, it becomes much harder to solve. And along those lines, the example I like to give is we need a set of parameters when we're playing poker. It's nice to have parameters. It's something we can embrace. And a great example of that is if I gave you a pound of sugar, a pound of flour, all the eggs, you know, butter, baking soda. I gave you all the different ingredients for baking a cake, and I asked you to bake me a cake. I bet you your cake's going to be pretty bad. Where if I gave you the same ingredients and I gave you an exact list, here's a recipe of exactly how to make it, all of a sudden your cake is much easier to make. It's going to taste a lot better. So, you know, I've seen it before where players will play for 5 or 10 years, whether they're playing too tight or too loose, and they really don't progress. You can't just go to the casino a couple times a week and expect to become a world-class player. It's just not how it works.
Well, I was talking to Jonathan Little the other day, and he talked about how he's read 100 books. He's a studier. And you're right, he's got to play the game to keep honed. Let me ask you this. You mentioned a lot of mistakes, and I don't want you to have to narrow it down, but can you tell us the most common mistake that the player that is perhaps a novice or inexperienced is making, the most common mistake out of all those ones you just mentioned?
Well, let me just say that I got nothing but respect for Jonathan Little. As far as teaching goes, he's got to be at the very top of the list, especially, you know, I hear nothing but good things about his teaching, and his play is obviously speaking for itself. $4 or $5 million in winnings. Guy's a complete stud. You know, as far as beginners go, the biggest leaks probably is just not re-raising enough. I like to think that re-raising is pretty much what separates the men from the boys and the women from the little girls. So you look at the average player re-raises about 4, maybe 5% of the time pre-flop. The average pro re-raises probably about 10% of the time pre-flop. So almost twice as often. Now, the average intermediate player is still going to open pots probably 15-18% of the time. Most pros might pick that up a little bit from 18 to maybe 20 or 22. But in this example, you don't see a doubling that, pros don't play twice as many hands pre-flop, but pros re-raise twice as often. So knowing who to re-raise, what stack sizes to re-raise, understanding effective stack sizes, implied odds, stack to pot ratios, certain times of the tournament where it's better or worse. Understanding all these fundamentals definitely makes it a lot easier. That's part of the problem right now is there's just so much gray area. Jonathan Little's read 100 books. I've read about 50. So he's an avid student. I'm half of an avid student. But, there's no way you're going to be a poker coach if you're not a student of the game. Even right now, I pretty much lost count, but I would say that I've watched hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of final tables on PokerStars this year. So even though it's Black Friday, even though I can't play on PokerStars, I still have it pulled up pretty much 24/7. Anytime there's a final table, I'm watching it.
Let me tell you, David, I don't consider myself a great player. I figured that out a long time ago. But one thing I'm a great fan of this game we call poker. And I'll watch a final table if it's 10 hours long. And one of the things I like about the World Series of Poker is these live broadcasts they do where the final tables go anywhere from 4 to 12 hours. Now, I caught a couple of final tables a couple years ago where you were broadcasting the final table. And I got to tell you, they were some of the most entertaining final tables going because you just seem to break it down so easily. Your commentating style, I guess, is a lot like your teaching style.
Well, I appreciate that. I think that I definitely have a leg up on a lot of the commentators, a lot of the writers, a lot of the interviewers, just because I've been so knee-deep in playing. I played 20,000 tournaments, so when it comes to, let's say, the end game of a tournament, I've made 500 final tables. It's not going to be like a big deal to commentate on that. And quite frankly, I know more about tournament poker than I do about anything else in the world. I've gone to undergrad, I've gone to grad school, I've studied this, that, and the other, but I still don't know. I still don't know anything else even close to as much as I do poker. And it's just a fun game. We're lucky that we like the game, that it's got a great general appeal, and also there's a lot of areas of the world where it's really not spread yet. Look at Latin America, for example. You've got Brazil and maybe a couple small hot pockets in Argentina and everything else, but really in Latin America it hasn't spread very much. The same thing goes for Asia. You have the Asian Poker Tour, and you have a bunch of casinos in the Philippines and Macau and everywhere else, but you look at it relative to the population, it's just not even on the map. India and the Orient, it could just blow up like wildfire. And I'm hoping that one of these days they're going to legalize federally here in the United States so that we can all get back to playing on all the sites and, playing 15 or 18 tables instead of 2 or 3.
It's obvious that you're a great teacher, a great promoter, a great commentator. On the table yourself, you run down your bio and it's consistent cashes, 30,000 here, 15,000 there, 8,000, 25K, throw in a live cash of 200 plus K. Have you figured this game out?
Well, yes and no. I definitely think that I'm playing it at an expert level, and I understand the intricacies like maybe the top 1 or 2 or 3% of players play. But, when you sit down at a table and you got Jonathan Little to your left and Steve O'Dwyer to his left and, Will Fahey to his left, and, if you're sitting down at a table with world-class players, everything changes. So you never figure it out. You never really put your finger on everything. And it's the same thing with business, same thing with people. Just when you think you got that deal landed, the deal might fall through. Just when you think that you know that person does something to someone else that makes you question their loyalty. And you just have to take the good with the bad and always weigh it. One of the biggest things is just being mentally neutral, being creative, being willing to change. Sometimes you might call on the flop expecting to call the turn, but they make a certain size of a bet, and you feel like you should fold. And, having a plan going in, but being willing to adapt, adjust, and overcome, it's it's just crucial. A lot of people are either on robot mode or, even worse probably, at the other end of the spectrum, everything's gray area. Everything that they're having to figure everything out on the go. And that's why it's great to have parameters. Like I said earlier, if you have 15, 18, 20 blinds, you got a great re-raise all-in stack. If you got a 10 blind stack, you got a great open all-in stack. If you got 35, 40 blinds or more, you've got a great stack to start re-raising small and picking on people. So yeah, I really, you can make a lot of analogies, but a great one would be like a golf swing. If you don't have the fundamentals of a great golf swing down, you're going to have trouble chipping. You're going to have trouble putting. You're going to have trouble with your driver. It really doesn't matter what club you're using in what scenario. It doesn't matter how hard or how easy the course is. If you don't have those fundamentals down pat, you're going to struggle. On the flip side of the coin, if you have all that figured out, yes, everything becomes easier.
All right, David. Lastly, we like to do a thing here on the show called Rapid Fire. I'm going to throw out some names and phrases, and you give me a sentence or two about each, okay? First of all, Victor Blum, Isildur.
Sputard, genius.
Phil Ivey.
Where's the money?
The broadcasting differences stylistically between you and Norman Chad.
About 19,800 tournaments.
Misclicking.
For the win.
The idea of full tilt rush poker.
Copied by everyone else.
Black Friday.
Black Friday. You got me.
November 9 and the 3-month break.
It would be great if they actually went out and marketed themselves, and I think that they can't rely on the players to market themselves. There needs to be an intensive effort from the WSOP, Caesars, and or a major Madison Avenue PR firm. I mean, WSOP has enough to worry about promoting their own brand, much less promoting the players within the brand.
Best teaching book on the market?
Probably the Pearl Jammer book.
And David Chicotsky in the main event this year?
Let's hope I run deep and score hard.